for total peace of mind, because it's happened before where we've dropped cameras or like you swear you hit the record button and then you find out you didn't. We've got this little guy, which I just kind of hide over there, which just
fantastic.
is that what that is an antidote for the anxiety when you're 42 minutes in going, God, I hope that thing is still recording.
So then is this mic am I positioned okay so that you can see me, or is a mic totally in my face?
It's a little in your face, but it's okay.
So I'm just making sure that for your recording that I don't look like I'm just a giant mic.
There's been worse scenarios where people have been filmed. It's like, it's not the worst thing to have a microphone cover up half your face. As someone who's done this for years, it's like in some ways that maybe it's beneficial. I don't even know.
All right, there we go. I'm going to put my little
characters. Okay, well, so first of all, I just, we can just kick right off. Do you want to
do it?
Yeah, we'll get rolling.
Initializing waveform.
Modulating signals for transmission.
Exploring the possible, probable, and preferable futures.
Welcome to Modem Futura. So, yeah, Rachna, welcome.
Thank you.
And specifically, welcome to Modem Futura, the show that explores the intersection of technology, society, and the possible, probable, and preferable futures, asking deep questions like, what will it mean to be human in the future? I'm super excited that so Andrew's gone for the week. So
we miss Andrew.
We miss Andrew, but he's having fun. And we'll hear all about his travels and stuff when he gets back. But I'm so thrilled that you were able to. I'm like, who should I have come talk with me? I'm like, let me see if Rachna's available. And so thank you for one, not ignoring my text message, and two, for joining me today.
Well, I'm going to thank Andrew for giving me this space. And I really thank you, Sean, for inviting me. I always love and enjoy our conversations. I always leave with a new nugget, a new thought, and a little bit of like, I need to think deeper about this. So yeah, I really
screen
appreciate
my
that.
text messages better is what you might leave with.
No.
First of all, this is super fun. And again, this is one of the added benefits right now is we are in. And yes, for those keeping track, Sean is still sweating because it is still hot in the studio. You can confirm it is
toasty.
very, very toasty in here. But this is summer. We're still in the sort of summer vibe sort of thing. It's like Modem Futura in July. We're kind of rolling with this. We've been having a lot of fun, which gives us a lot of flexibility because one, we have given ourselves the permission when we have our summer episodes just to talk about whatever in the world we feel like talking about. So that's one thing. But two, also, I think I don't know if we caught it when between setting up all the cameras and hitting all the record buttons and doing all this stuff. I don't know if we caught it, but it was quite funny. So you have some amazing earrings that you had to take off because of course, headphone cans don't play well with like earrings. So those are the Wally earrings. Those are so
Wally
cute.
and Eva. This is my AI representation. I often wear it for students when I am, teaching AI or working or talking about it. I wear it just as a fun icebreaker.
As a fun bit. And also a reminder not to end up as those humans in the hover chairs.
No, yes, we don't want to be that. Exactly.
So Rachna, first of all, so thank you. And this is not the first time you've podcasted with me, but it is the first time you've been on Modem Futura.
It is.
So, and I do want to make sure I introduce you to our audience, first of all, so they get to know the amazing Rachna. I'm going to introduce you in a weird way, and then I want to hear you. You can tell our audience a little bit about what it is that you do here. So I like to. Well, first of all, you're also newly minted Dr. Rachna Mathur, which is really cool. I feel like the last time I actually saw you I was in Geneva and you were here in Tempe, Arizona defending your dissertation.
Yes.
So major congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Tremendous milestone. And it's just fun. Yeah. I'm like, it's always fun when anyone but especially if it's a colleague, a friend, whoever, a family member, when they have crossed that barrier and have been minted as a fresh doctor.
Shout out Sean, who has been part of my cheer squad from the start. And I deeply appreciate you attended my defense. So thank you.
Of course. I literally wouldn't have missed it. And so even an ocean apart wouldn't have stopped me from showing up and providing support. Because it is that big of a milestone. So congratulations. But for those of you who don't know Rachna yet, she is an artist, an engineer, a teacher, a tinkerer, a researcher, a dreamer, a dancer even.
Yes.
What else?
Lifelong learner.
Lifelong learner, of course.
Yeah.
But maybe you could tell a little bit about what it is. Because I'm also like, what is your title now? Because I think every time we talk,
who knows?
Every time we sit down, I'm like, and I'm going to introduce you. And I'm like, have to check the notes. I'm like, well, your title has changed again. So I like my sort of introduction because I tell a little bit about who you are as just an amazing person and a colleague and friend. And the conversations we get into around you name it, are always fun. And just like this, in the spirit of Modem Futura, we go wherever we want with these conversations. It's a lot of fun. But maybe could you share with our audience a little bit about what it is that you do in terms of our connection or your connection here to ASU? Because you are, let me see if I've got the right title or the most updated one. STEM Strategist?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. All right.
I've got a couple made up titles too. I'll share those in a second.
I should have. You could hear the hedge in my voice. I'm like, it was the question mark.
No, you're not the only one.
Strategist?
I'll tell you what, even at ASU and ASU Prep, which is where I work, I have titles made up for me, and it's always context-based, which is probably one of my favorite things is I actually don't have to stick with one title anymore. I think one week someone called me emerging tech strategist, and I'm like, I'll
take it for this week.
I'll take it because I just defended, my whole thing was on AI. So I was like, I am this week.
I'm that now. Sure.
But your introduction was perfect. That is actually my favorite. I did steal that
partially from your own website.
I know. That is my website one. That's my favorite one because I always start my introduction with I'm an artist. And I think that's where just this kind of deep creativity rooted in that, and everything kind of stems from that. I would say art and STEM have been my focus areas, but my title, you are correct, is Senior STEM Strategist at ASU Preparatory Academy. I'm also called an engineer in residence because a lot of my work is connected to microelectronics, semiconductor, and emerging tech. Right. But I think
you have a really interesting background because before, I don't know how much you want to get into that, but I mean, before all this stuff that you were big in the semiconductor industry and things, right?
Yeah. So, I spent the first half of my career in semiconductors.
So is it like lab coat, like clean room kind of thing?
No, I used to peer through the windows and see I am 100% a software engineer and architect. So I was often on the side of architecting design algorithms and patenting them as well. So I spent a lifetime in that kind of space, but I always had a knack for communicating complicated ideas to little people, which is why I ended up starting my own consulting and STEM advocacy kind of company, teaching what I knew best was robotics, AI, and coding. And then I sort of made my way, pivoted into education after that, got my doctorate.
Had to pick up one of those along the way, as one does, right?
That's what does along the way. I was like, I need to learn more. Let's just do a doctorate. Yeah. And then I found my way.
You made the mistake of going, that looks fun.
Yeah. That was, it was this.
And then by the end.
I'm going to blame Punya for that. Punya, if you're listening to this, he was like, this is fun. You should do it. And so so I also dragged him into my committee for that reason.
There you go.
You said it was fun.
That's right. Now you have to sit on this.
Now you got to read this.
That's right.
So and so at ASU Prep, a lot of what I do is reimagining some of our STEM strategy. I look at what that means across our different school systems. I also sit within a school design team that's also thinking about the use of AI, the use of emerging technologies like mixed realities as part of my work in our schooling system, both as students learning as consumers, but also as creators. And then what does this mean for our very act of learning and knowledge itself? So that's some of the stuff that
that's fun.
I think that's what I do. I don't, Megan, if you're listening, that's what I do. She's my boss.
Luckily, what we don't have is we don't have a way for people to call in live to be like, that's not actually what.
Is that what you do?
Yeah.
That's what I think I do.
For the safety and benefit of everyone, we're not live streaming, so we'll be okay. No, I think that's incredibly awesome, and I think one of the things. One thing that I think is really fun that I like to, let's open this up. Well, first of all, it's summer, so you can feel free also to diverge this conversation wherever. We talk about movies, we talk about anything. So nothing is off limits. But I am curious about, something that we often talk about is that we both have small kids.
Yep.
I was earlier dismayed to learn how old your oldest daughter is already because I'm like, I was like, no, there's no possible way she's that old.
I know, high school.
Oh, no, I was not prepared for that.
I'm not either.
Somehow the time dilation is just it's weird and it's sometimes upsetting when you're like, there's no way. I feel like that sometimes. I look at my own kids and I'm just like, God, you just look like you're like a dude now.
Yeah,
you're no longer this little kid. And I'm like, when does it, it's so slow. And then all of a sudden it snaps and you're like, what?
Yes.
I don't, and then I'm like, I don't like this.
One started today. One started yesterday.
Yeah.
And then my older one is starting the end of this month too.
Yeah. Well, it is. Well, and also as we sit here sweating in Arizona, it's also like same with my family. They're all back to school, which feels weird because I'm still like in summer mode. So, it's literally Modem Futura in July. We're having a summer episode and my kids are already back at school and all this kind of stuff. But one of the things that we all often end up talking about is this position or this question around for young kids, for and for everyone who's listening to this. I mean, you can extrapolate this to whatever group of non-adult aged people, but their lives are going to be so much different growing up. And this was already the case, right? With a lot of ubiquity of information and technology that was, pre sort of the sort of Cambrian explosion, if you will, of like the Gen AI sort of wave. Even before that, their lives are already going to be markedly different than how when we grew up, just based on access of things. And I mean, I tell this story all the time. I mean, I slip into that sort of cliche old dad mode of like, you don't know how hard I had it when I had to wake up. I had to wake up at 6 a.m. to watch the cartoon that I wanted to see. And these kids just can binge watch Phineas and Ferb or whatever else it is.
First world.
You know what I mean? They don't understand the temporal nature of how TV used to work. So it's already going to be different, right? And that always sets up some fun dynamics anyway. But now enter the role of AI, right? The kids, whether or not, and this is something like Andrew and I have talked about before, and this is not new to this show.
Yes, for sure.
But even if people aren't directly engaged in the tool, so we can use generative AI for an example, even if they are part of a vulnerable population, part of a population that's been excluded from these tools, either by access or they might live in a part of the world that doesn't have power yet in terms, right? So, I mean, but even in that situation, and even with kids who are maybe even depending on their age, depending on access, depending on the school system, whatever, even if they have not yet directly engaged with like an AI tool, with ChatGPT or with they are still their experiences are still being influenced, shaped, determined, created, augmented, reviewed, etc. They're still living in this world that has been changed by the use of these tools and will continue to do so. And so the question then is, what's going to happen? How do we feel about it? What do we think is going to happen? I don't know. I'm curious to hear what your sort of gut reaction is to.
You know what? Like something that I was just thinking about, even the point that you brought up, that even if you don't have, depending on access and all these things that affect your level of engagement, I guess, with these tools. And it sort of made me think about, okay, so I, even though I was born here, I spent my high school years in India. And while personally as a family, we might have had access to certain devices and things, our school systems didn't. So I grew up through this time frame while there was internet, there were all kinds of devices, not using any of it. And what it ended up creating was this like very separate life. Like it was almost as if technology and these items that were influencing our lives were completely separate to the act of learning and going to school. So it meant in school, I was using pencil, paper, no calculator, coming home and doing something completely different if I had those things. And that was also a hit or miss. I remember when we had a computer, but that computer was part of an office system, and we were not allowed to go into the office, my uncle's office. We lived, in a.
I think everybody had one of those kind of things where it's like, I remember, even growing up, it's like, you don't go into the office and touch the computer. You know what I mean?
We weren't allowed to touch a computer and play. I think the only thing we did was play Prince of Persia, if anyone remembers that.
That's a great game.
That'll date the time frame.
Yes.
So I think about, even in that situation, I'm kind of like reflecting is it almost feels like we're in that somewhat of that space where the schools, at the same time, there were schools with labs and computers. That was not the case where I was at. In the U.S., yes. So we're in that situation where we'll see some schools just, it's It's like as if it's not a thing that's happening at all.
Right.
It's just a tool, a thing. It's separate from the life that's in school, which is going about the traditional classic ways of learning, and that is knowledge itself. Whereas I think, the system that I'm in is looking at embracing and shifting how we learn, or the very idea of learning and knowledge itself. And that, I'm constantly pondering that because it creates such a huge rift.
Yeah.
With that kind of, I don't know that that's no solution here other than the systems where this is not being addressed or thought about, at least thought about.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing with it, I don't care, at least thought about, is it leaves those students behind. And then we're left in that situation where if they have it at home, they're just going to learn whatever they need to learn from that at-home system. And they often get ahead of their peers that may not have access. So I worry about pieces like that. I do worry about the access. And I do wonder, even in the systems where there may be the possibility of access, they might even have the devices and things. When you're not thinking about it, these students are coming to school and just going about school the way it's always been.
Yeah.
And then you hope, they may, if they have devices at home or people at home or friends at home, they're going back and either through gaming. Gaming is powerful, a way of learning a lot of things that kids learn through that. They will get access that way, but then they're never taught the boundaries. I think about myself.
Sure.
As growing up, I was still a young adult by then, but none of the boundaries around digital citizenship or technology were taught through school or my parents.
No, it didn't exist. That was, we could trace it back, you want to put our research hats on, we can trace back, even just when we started talking about that. But originally, that wasn't, as a child of the 80s and 90s, that was not.
But do you think we're kind of in that? I feel like sometimes we're right back.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel like deja vu.
There is, I would say, I think there is a level of like a cyclical nature because, and again,
I know you've talked to.
I'm a broken record on this one. I'll pull out Neil Postman and all this kind of stuff.
I love Neil Postman.
And the funny thing is, there's a lot of his work I don't agree with, but
his 5 things.
Yes. But there's a lot of information in there when we think about the disruption of these technologies. And there is, again, if you study technology, you study especially digital-based technologies, these things are in some ways, they follow a very cyclical pattern of how they go in. We even have these ideas of like diffusion of innovations and how these also spread through communities or societies as well. Again, the time frames and the scales can be wildly different, but they still follow these same sort of patterns. So I think there is a lot of similarities, right? So you can pick out these things. You can say, oh yeah, well, if you rewind, the clock, I think this happens a lot with stuff when we're faced with this idea of, and there's not that I normally quote Mike Tyson very often, but he has a good, I'm pretty sure it was, I'll check, had a quote that when you go into the ring, everyone's got a plan. And then the minute you get punched in the nose, that plan goes out the window.
I like
right?
that.
And so a lot of this stuff, if you think about a lot of the educational system response to the Gen AI, I call it the Cambrian explosion period, just because I think it's interesting that in some ways, there is this almost like historical record of when this happened, right? In terms of there was, and we talked about this in our last couple episodes too, this idea of the low grade background steel. I'm fascinated by this, but that there is this measurable line in human history where things did not exist before it and existed after it, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a very clear sort of like fossil record, if you will, of when these things came.
I like that fossil record.
And so like educational systems that may have been well prepared for emerging technologies in what we knew of that at the time. So if you go back rewind the clock to pre-November 2022, school systems are still just completely reeling from COVID,
pandemic,
right? And all the pivot that had to happen from going from mostly, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush here, but a mostly traditional schooling systems.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? And they had to pivot instantly to fully remote, and some did it well, some did it poorly. Everything probably else falls right in between. And that was this massive amount of change and whiplash that happened. just as those things were starting to cobble everything back together and find normalcy, all of a sudden now you has entered generative AI tools, and the panic and the hair on fire, the hand waving, hand wringing, whatever, the existential screams of despair. This again, the moral panic around all of these technologies. Again, that is predictable. When new things like this happen, we have those. But the real question would be, and I think back to your point of like, is it very similar? I think, yeah, there are very similar telltale markers of any new disruptive technology and how it sort of works its way through a system, right? The difference, though, that this is one thing that I come back to is, and this is a long-standing question. I just asked this last week when Andrew and I, where I was like, and when you're like, is this something we've had before? I even went back further. I said, what's more important, that AI, the development of where we are with artificial intelligence, or the written word? Right? Because again, every single one of these moments had at the time it was taking place, had an unprecedented change in the way humans behave. And we come back to this question, what does it mean to be human once these new things happen, when these new innovations happen, right? I mean, written word literally was like how do you say it? Heretical? Is that right? Heresy? It was heresy. What? Anyway, they didn't like it. But
it was heresy.
But it was threatening the way of doing it. It was going to ruin our abilities to think and store information in our minds if we could just write it down.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? You've just destroyed your
ability
ruined.
to remember everything.
We're doomed.
It was
right. And that was the written word. And then the same thing came, and I mean like literally handwriting or chiseling into a stone. Then, of course, the Gutenberg press. Oh, if you give people the chance to read, it's going to be pandemonium. Everything's doomed.
Also, control over people is
absolutely
information.
Always with the other
power control.
Absolutely, right. So and same thing: internet, television, radio, you name it, right? The same patterns are there. The same moral panic, the doom, whatever. But I think what's going to be interesting is when we come back and we start thinking about generative AI or just the AI as a larger field.
Yeah.
The potential there, it still raises these questions of this might be something that is so transformational that while it needed all of those other sort of advancements and sort of shakeups to happen, that this one might be different.
Yeah. I mean,
is it right now? I don't know. We're still so much in the middle of this phase. It's difficult to say. But that is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about is, as these technologies are starting to show or at least provide a theoretical glimmer of what might be possible if these things happen, right? You start thinking like these might have very profound ways of changing human activity and human behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
The Neil Postman, it's going to be ecological.
That's right.
It's going to permeate into every aspect. And we aren't seeing that quite yet when it becomes indistinguishable from your just daily task or life.
Sure.
And that affects how you interact or how you do an activity. Or I just even think about Amazon and shopping. Who would have thought that was going to be the way of life then? But as I think about these young students, their life, obviously, you've already said this, it's going to be an ecological shift for them. Yep. It's going to be different how they interact with these, I don't even know, I don't want to say devices, these ways of being. It is definitely a set of technologies that are affecting that, but it's going to affect how they think, interact, operate, what social connections even mean. And sometimes I have to step back and go, I'm struggling with my own self and my own ideas because of just the way I've grown up. Honestly, it's just, I acknowledge it's like kind of the old dad, you said, old mom thing that goes on through my head that I have to put that aside. So it makes me wonder when I go into a space, a classroom with kids, a schooling system, our own children, I have to step back and go, I'm always approaching it with a historical lens. Yeah. And they are trying to create something completely different and new and thinking.
Right.
And if I constantly am trying to teach based on history, I love that you had Ruth on here because she's always thinking from that future
thinking
lens, which I don't think we do really well in school systems for the record. But if we're always teaching with whatever I know, I think I'm just missing a massive opportunity of what they can create. My job maybe is just to keep them safe and some boundaries so they don't hurt themselves. But I think everything else is like a disservice in some ways. And I'm totally straying.
Hey, welcome to Modem Futura, Rachna.
I went from here to there.
No, okay. That's fine. No, but I think the other, it is this interesting thing because, even someone like myself, right? So have been working in researching and teaching emerging technologies and advanced technologies for a long time. And so you have this grounded feeling of like, I'm pretty sure I know what the kids are going to need and especially when it comes to your own child, you're like, I'm pretty sure I know the skills and how to navigate the system as the affordance of someone who's gone through it and has, done these kind of, that sort of like educational path as well. But I find myself questioning that dramatically right now.
Yes.
Because and again, you see this all the time with different sort of publications. And there's right now, one of the good things, which borders on the cautionary of there being too much information constantly. While, a few years ago, there was an absolute void of a lot of different resources coming out, thinking about it. How do we do this? What do we do? Now that's not the case. Now every week there's a new report coming out about
a new framework,
a new report. And that's good. There's always the one concern I always have is that at some point it almost becomes too much.
Yes.
But that's a good problem to have as opposed to the opposite of having not enough people thinking about these things. But you really start questioning, and again, one of the questions, and this is where I wear my futures hat and will push, right? And a lot of times these questions, sometimes people can get very defensive when I ask them because it's not meant to be like, I don't think you or your entire profession is valuable. It's more of, when you start, again, seeing some of the things that these types of technologies and tools can do and the affordances, for example, of using large language models to help you write, help you create this kind of idea and have access to essentially the entire historical body of human created work that's ever existed that you couldn't do on your own. There's no way in a human lifetime that you could do enough research to even scratch the surface of the amount of information that these systems have, because they have literally everything. They've eaten the world in that sense. So the question then becomes, right, if this is the case and you're in, what's a good, we can back up to a certain grade. Let's say you're in second grade.
Yeah,
right. So I got
my third grader.
You have it all in front of you still for the most part. Right. At what point, as these things continue to push, will we start to lose the interest, lose the need, lose the desire to learn how to write?
I am wondering, especially you bring up the need. What do we really need to? And I am wondering that. So I will take the example of one student that I know, and he is dyslexic. And there are a couple of ways to go about it, right? You could continue with the sort of aggressive reading therapies that for some reason.
There's lots of great programs and things to do. Yep.
That exist. But then I've also come across teachers that said, okay, well, yes, and I'm going to let them use the reader.
Sure.
And have it
assistive
read,
technology.
And read to them. But that's not consistent even within a schooling system. That just came down to that one teacher. But then I'm going, do they need to read?
Yeah. Well, this is, and again, and I hope for people listening, if you start getting all like, what? How?
I think that makes people angry.
It should stir emotion. It should stir something because and these are things that we, not just you and I, but we collectively need to be talking about. Because these are not decisions that ultimately in some cases, someone makes a decision. But these are big societal questions. When you have technology that can do the thing quicker, better, more effective, whatever, the natural question on the other side of that is, do I still need to do that if I don't want to? If you want to, of course,
maybe.
right?
Maybe that's what it is.
And you can make that, here's the scary part, right? Is that you can start to make that extension to schools.
Yes.
What's the role what's the role of an educational system in the future, right? We're not talking about today or tomorrow, even the next, decade probably easily.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move the time scale down because it's a little easier to talk about, especially as it's further down. So if we'll grab onto the time scale and just join us as we zip 50 years into the future. We're still sweating. We're still here. Oh my God. You look great for 50 years. Like I wish, we've solved.
That's because, we have anti-aging.
That's right. By 50 years from now, hopefully we have reached, the escape velocity on aging, frozen in time as,
frozen in time.
50 years forward. Hey, that'd be great. Coffee's still even warm. Look at that. The future is amazing. But we're 50 years in the future. And the question now is with, these ubiquitous AI platforms and these are permeating every aspect of human activity. One, it raises a question if you look at the different ends of things. So you look at, what is the role of an educational system in full, right?
Yes.
And you go back historically, right? While there's many points, and I don't want to get any hate mail here, but like one of the main points was just to prepare an educated civic unit that would be able to fully function in a society and contribute to the economy of said society, right?
Yeah.
But if you start looking far enough down the line and start to believe some of these things that are promised in terms of these grand, hyped promises of what advanced AI tools like, and I'll throw out the buzzwords, right? AGI or super intelligence, if that were to be a capable achievement, which I'm very skeptical of, but still, there is a possible that some version of that.
I'll go with that. Yes.
Yeah.
And some embodied versions. What are those
Sure.
when they're moving around with us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now they're contained into like a UI kit where you're like, well, I have to type or talk, but it's
little
like
robots on our campus kind of thing.
Yeah,
But when it's
or just-
completely embodied.
sure,
then what?
absolutely. But so if you take one end of that, and most of that work has been replaced by some sort of autonomous agent, whatever.
Yep.
So they've taken the drudgery away of work from all humans and let us do whatever
What
we
is
want to
our
do.
purpose?
Right? Well, there's that question. Do we just become the floaty chair people of Wall-E, having no
That's why
purpose,
he's
feeling no tether or no sense of direction? Do we spend our time all in leisure or just pursuing the things that we would pursue, having no sort of invented mechanism around us that revolves around money, for example. I must work because I need the money to pay my bills, to pay this, to buy that. If, for example, I mean, you look to something like a Star Trek as a sci-fi sort of example of a post-scarcity society where everyone has everything.
Yeah.
You want it,
I like
you
that.
you want
Yeah,
it, you
that's
got
a
it,
good-
right?
yeah.
I mean, it's all just molecules.
Yes.
Why not have that? Does money make the thing? No. Money has no value other than the shared agreed idea that this piece of paper has value. And, and I have it and you want it, or you have it and I want it.
All made up.
It's all made up, right? In the end, right? I think about this all the time, like with space stuff, because I'm always like, just do it. They're like, it's so expensive. Will can never afford it. I'm like, it doesn't cost nothing costs money. It's just molecules. Just make the stuff. The trick is motivation to make the stuff cost little imaginary pieces of paper.
So maybe that's it.
And now we don't even do paper. We just have bits.
Right.
Anyway, but if you remove that, right? So you remove this professional aim of I'm going to go through the school system, and we can pick on higher ed because maybe it's easier. It's easier for people to stomach. If we pick on that, I'm not going to go to college anymore because there's no job for me at the other end.
Yeah.
All the AI systems that Rachna programmed are now all the engineers have been programmed by Rachna. There's no room for humans anymore. Okay. Well, then what do I do with my time? Where do I go? If I'm not going to college, if I'm not going to some kind of, economic profession, what do I need to learn how to do these things for if I'm not going to be doing them anyway?
Yeah. And so 50 years is not very long. That means you and I are preparing our children right now.
Let's go to 100.
So now
I just got really uncomfortable with my own timeline.
Stressed me out because I was like, wait a minute, am I preparing my children for that 50-year version?
Yeah, and again, this is all hypothetical. Who's to say that would come? But if you were to believe the hype machines, this is the future that they are trying to push, right? That we will take away work, and this is an ongoing frustration too of when you get into like this techno-determinism sort of situation where it's like, oh, it will just be that way and we'll solve any problems with more technology. Don't worry about the unintended consequences. We'll engineer our ways out of that.
Yeah.
Of course we get to a situation where we can't do that anymore. And maybe that's AI's role perhaps, is to engineer the things that we can no longer do. But again, coming back to this idea of education and this kind of scary question, and writing is just one example. But if we're taking away these things that have historically been
done by a human
and only by humans,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, that's what is one of the things when you say, oh, is this maybe just like similar disruptions in the past? One argument is, yes, except that this is demonstrating now an ability, a competency, and in some case, a exceptional competency to do things. I mean, even with art, even with media creation, right? Things that have historically always been held as only a human endeavor.
Especially creativity and art.
Right? And that raises these questions. Well, then if that's under threat, and if we don't do that, right? You can even ask the question of like, where do we go? Where does a human go in all this if we just get sort of removed from the equation?
To go to the Himalayas,
Yeah,
meditate, maybe.
Maybe.
But no, I'm joking, but
Yeah.
I'm not. Also wondering where maybe it comes down to like really basic, like happiness. How does one measure that? What are we
Sure.
doing? And that gets, I do get meta then, where I'm wondering, well, what if that were the future? And that you end up in, I don't know if that's 50 years and our kids are going to end up in that situation. And what would their purpose be? And maybe you are doing art, creative, other tasks for the joy of it. Maybe you are seeking what is level for your happiness. Sounds quite distinct from the version of life we're living right now. Always in a buzz, always moving about, always trying to get something done. I don't know if it's all taken care of by other entities, devices, some AI or something like that. Then am I just hiking mountains? That I don't, that I can still do.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. That would be a pretty sweet way to just be like, well, it's a Tuesday. I'm going on a hike and I'm taking some pictures and I'm just going to enjoy my time.
Like, so there are like no careers really.
I guess, right? But that's one of the questions. And of course, the realities are, right, in the short term, even if you go out to 100 years, there's no way that everything would be replaced.
Yeah.
But so of course you have this, and of course there's one major flaw in this utopian sort of post-scarcity.
Manage the devices.
Yeah, who becomes just turn it off, turn it back on. But there's one major flaw in that, and that of course is that would require someone to give up their power and their control. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
And there you go.
So while that's still there, and again, that can change, but in the present term, that's something that we have to grapple with is like, if you were to give, for example, universal basic income, where does that come from? Who gets it? How do you determine what is basic income? What is a livable wage? Because if you were to look around right now, what's livable here is not livable there, which
much
there's
disparity.
Of course, nothing is evenly distributed.
I do wonder about that. Like just how you talk about you. I always wonder.
It's an incredible problem. And it's a lot of hand waving of like, oh, don't worry, we'll solve that with UBI. It's like, oh, well, sure, if we do hand wavy stuff like chalkboard stuff where you're like, don't worry, that'll get solved. It's like, well, the actual solving of that is going to be an incredibly nuanced and difficult and complex and challenging endeavor.
That's when my brain hurts when I do think about, and I do get into these modes wondering, will that be in the lifespan of my kids?
Yeah.
And then I wonder, I question my own purpose and what I am doing. And then I look at maybe you're right. That's maybe a little more extreme and long term. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Sure.
I want maybe, but as I think about more in the next maybe decade-ish or so, or looking at our kind of bringing it back to just thinking about us, our own young people in our lives, the one of mine who's now in high school, which I can't, like we said, can't believe that.
Yep.
I look at their day-to-day and wonder, what is it that I want to set them or maybe even our students at ASU or ASU Prep up for? And I'm part of it, I think, right now, at least short term, I'll call it short term, is, there's a lot of conversations around policy, usage, this, that, and all. But I think that I always tell the students when I'm talking about careers and these ideas is more to do with an attribute, which is having a sense of flexibility, which I'm not sure that we are entirely conveying or teaching or advocating or even showcasing. And flexibility doesn't just mean in a career, it comes in many, many ways.
Sure.
It's like, for example, I'm going to be flexible. It is 110 degrees. Maybe the AC stops working for some reason.
Yep.
And not having the tolerance for bits and pieces. Because I have to have it a certain way. Okay.
Yeah.
Granted, that's going to physically affect you.
That's true.
You're going to sweat, pour sweat.
As I can attest, the heat does affect you adversely.
So maybe I'm just talking about this idea of a sort of a flexible nature where you may have prepared for a certain path, a certain career. And honestly, it could just flip in a moment with the level of change that's occurring. So I'm going to be this, I'm literally thinking about my own career as a software engineer. I don't actually think half the stuff I did that took 6 months would be done today.
Sure.
I am certain some kid coming out of school could do that in like 2 days, what took me 6 months.
Yeah.
And I can...
Yeah.
Well, with AI.
Sure.
With AI.
Sure.
Not totally alone, but I do see a lot of the things just completely done in like a day or two, or maybe even a minute.
Yeah.
So if I am in that inflection point, maybe I'm in the system where I've just went and done my entire degree and I get to the work world and it's like none of what I learned matters because it could literally be done by a device. I could sit there and gripe about it and say that the world is unfair, or I can start to adjust and shift. And I would love for our students, I would love for my kids to be able to just be flexible, be able to pivot.
And so you bring up a good point. And I think, so one of the questions too that kind of swirls around this idea as well, right, is like right now during this transitional, well, I'll call it a transitional phase where you have professionals who you have experts across the board in whatever domains they are in using artificial intelligence, for example. They still have their expertise, right? They still have these critical ability to evaluate the output of these systems to go, whoa, that's wrong. That's whoops, nope, that's a whoops-a-daisies. That's I don't like using the term hallucination, but that's an error, that's inaccurate, whatever. You still know what you want. You still know what you need as a professional. So if I'm using it and I'm saying, help me come up with like a research outline for this topic, and I want to investigate this, and this, and then pepper in anything else that I might not know to ask. You get this result and you can go with your like, okay, yeah, I see the connections.
I can assess and evaluate.
Yep.
Yes.
Because you have that pre-existing expertise in understanding how this information is supposed to be done, how it's supposed to connect, looking for ways of gaps or issues or things like that. The threat, of course, is that as that system progresses and as the people come behind you or us or whoever, if you don't have that traditional set of critical skills to evaluate these things because you've only ever been taught by the system.
Yep, that's all. That's
or only ever used
question.
The system, right? You lose the very ability to accurately detect when it's inaccurate, and you're just sort of along for the ride. You no longer have that agency because you haven't learned it. So you don't know. And the system starts to slowly change. And these things aren't usually drastic. They're small incremental changes.
Yes.
So you're like, sounds right. And this happens to, I can say.
We are doing this as adults.
Oh, yeah.
Already.
The stuff I'll look at, what'll catch me, and I've noticed it even in my own use of these tools, is you notice an element of either comfort or even laziness where you're like, I look at this, you're like, yep, this is good. This is good. This is accurate. This is good. Perfect. Next one. This is good. I'll skip a little bit.
I have to question, why are we being lazy though? And I think it is like it's
the loss of friction. It's circumventing. We had this conversation. I think we had a great conversation back when Punya Mishra was on the show. This is a few episodes ago. I forget the number, where we were talking too about this exact topic was the danger of losing the friction of learning, right? When you lose that friction, because friction can be good, but a lot of times it's in your way. It's hard. Learning is difficult. Learning something, when you go from a state of not knowing something to knowing something, that friction that happens in between is difficult.
Yeah.
It literally costs lots of calories of your brain to fire up, to spin, to crunch on these things. That time when you feel that frustration and that friction,
that productive struggle,
we like to label that productive struggle, but if you're feeling it, you don't go, there's that productive struggle
No,
I was
that's
hoping
right.
for.
That's
You
teacher
go,
speak.
God, this is frustrating. So if you're offered, take this path.
Yeah.
Here's
The
zero.
easy button.
Yeah. You want
Zero
an
friction.
output that's faster, better, and more coherent than what you were doing.
I'm going to go that way.
And also, by the way, it's not going to hurt your brain.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
go that way. And now you've removed that friction, right? And
Mhm.
maybe the results are great. And over time, again, the accuracy, again, you become a passenger to where this is going and no longer in control of it. And not only that, you've lost the ability to recognize that it's going the wrong way.
So you end up like the people on these.
You end up in the hover chair.
So
I
think with that thinking in mind, I mean, at least for now, I think there maybe once a generation or two goes through, this doesn't exist anymore. But at the moment, I mean, at least in some of the work that we're doing has been grappling with that and trying to think through the assessment piece and teaching that sense of assessment,
Yeah.
the same rigor and things that we have spent a lifetime trying to learn to figure out, does this output make sense?
Yeah.
Does it coincide with all of the expertise and learning that's grounded in some sort of science or some
Yeah.
sort of fact or something like that? Is part of what we are, at least for now, teaching. Now,
Sure.
when that generation goes through and it's one entire full gen that's only ever grown up with these devices,
Yeah.
what do they continue
Well,
that tradition?
Well, that's it. I mean,
don't know.
and think about it, right? I mean, at some point, the educators who are the educators who are in the classroom, the educators who are creating curriculum, who are running the schools, eventually those will be the same kids who grew up with nothing but AI,
Yes.
right? And so, at some point, you will wash out
Yep.
all of the people who have done it before,
I
right?
yes,
You and
I do
I
think so.
are probably the last generation of professionals who everyone who has, walking back 5 years now, everyone who has graduated from college or high school in the last 5 years has had AI part of their school
Yes, in
right?
some fashion.
in some fashion. Again, even if they themselves weren't
yeah, they probably weren't
using a
even
tool. If you submitted an application to a university, I guarantee an AI
It had-
system was
yeah.
reading it
I mean,
before
they're using
human did.
Google,
Yeah.
so they are using
I mean,
AI.
you can't. That's part. Yeah, that's part of it. So there's that piece that's kind of always there, and that's something this is something that I think about a lot when I'm just kind of like I'll start going there
Mhm.
and start just wondering like, well, what does that mean? Because there is this notion too of this, and I think in some ways. Some of the critiques of like large language models right now, for example, is that we're kind of hitting this wall, which is like, if you've noticed, you're like, where's the next version? Why isn't it getting better?
It's getting worse.
It's getting hard because also there's no more information.
Mhm.
And you start rolling in things, I don't want to get too deep because we'll set up for hour 3 and hour 4 of our podcast. But again, coming back to this idea too, where if you start having all of these systems creating the content
Yes,
and putting
I
it
always
out there, so
wonder
you
that.
end up in this sort of like
Loop.
reciprocal, like, this almost like a nightmare of, so a good example is a dictionary.
Mhm.
Okay. Every word that's in the dictionary, like every word in the description, the definition of a word in the dictionary is also in the dictionary.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Right. So it's a cool volume when you think about it, that every word that's used in the dictionary is in the dictionary
also
itself.
defined.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And all the words
So
that
now
define
you're
it,
just-
and all the words that define that word are also in the dictionary.
Yes.
And all the words that define that one are same. Right. So it's a contained volume of this, like, just, it's
Information
Yeah.
there, yeah.
It's incredibly cool.
Imagine
However,
that.
right. Well, this is a concern where there's no more human-made content
Mhm.
to ingest into these systems, but they're under pressure to get bigger, better, faster, smarter, all this kind of stuff. So where do they get content? Well, we're now, and this is where that low background steel kind of analogy comes in, is ever since 2022, everything that's been produced, whether human or not, is in some way contaminated with generative AI, or there's no way to tell if it wasn't, right? And even if you didn't use it necessarily intentionally, explicitly, it probably still is contaminated in some fashion,
Yes.
right? And so, and as that continues, and as large players are creating synthetic users that are pumping out content,
Mhm.
or bots that are creating content, et cetera, goes on and on and on. you start feeding the content that is being trained on is content that is output from previous versions or generations of artificial intelligence.
It's feeding itself.
Yeah. And you just end up in this situation where you just have this incredibly closed ecosystem of it's just, it's like
a dictionary.
It's like what is it? Like the snake eating its own tail or whatever.
Ouroboros. Is that what it's? Yeah, that's what it's. I think that's what. Well, and that kind of. I feel like we have these conversations in my house all the time, and it's so weird. And I feel like maybe that's often what, our kids are also hearing and wondering about. That leads them to wonder.
Sure.
But I think, yes, that's kind of what is occurring and will happen. It seems that way, at least. So it makes me wonder. Then, do we start? You're probably already seeing elements of this where there are parts of society that now, this is so dystopian version of things. I'm sorry, I'm going dystopian. We're in a very dystopian novel phase in our house, and content and movies.
Sure.
But where it's, you go into these like factions that are
Yep, I'm with you. Hey man,
pure human,
Yeah, oh sure, yeah.
And where you we
got Asimov, we got Dune, we got all kind of factions.
All of them, right?
Everything devolves into factions because when there's a power vacuum, right? Everyone has to.
Yeah, they're actually pretty. They're frightening and accurate in that sense.
Sure.
That you set up, an entirely pure human society. Did you ever see that show, Humans?
Human.
Oh my God, that's so disturbing too, because now the robots are fighting.
Tell me more about this show, Human. What is this? Is this old?
It is old.
Humans?
Like it felt so surreal and unrealistic. It was like a short 2-season series.
Oh, okay.
And it did come out maybe it's been like 10 years.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, but it's about
it's on Tubi. That's not a good. That's not a good sign.
Started out on Netflix. It was Netflix.
Oh, it was a Netflix show.
It was Netflix, and it started out as it was about the idea of we've gotten to the point in humanity that the robots are They are fighting for their own rights.
Is it a BBC production? Channel 4?
Maybe. Let me see. What is it?
It says debuted in 2015 on Channel 4.
Oh, it's 2015. So yeah, 10 years ago. I was right.
Wow.
And at that time,
I missed this one. I don't know this show.
A decade ago, I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. But now these are like machines fighting for the rights. And there's an entire faction of humans going, we're going to live in a pure human society.
Sure.
No cyber synthetic humans and stuff like that.
Yep.
Nobody with any kind of cyber pieces to themselves.
Of course, yeah.
And you set up an entire colony. And so there's a part of me that wonders, is this the world that our children are going to land in?
Well, I think that's a good question because I raised this, I think it was last week or something. I can't remember, but also talking as these things build, because again, pendulums swing both directions, right? I think it was last week I said the same thing where it's like, they swing one direction, to an extreme and then they come back.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the joke was you want to live on swinging the direction you like and be gone before it comes back the other way. But that does raise that question. And maybe this is a more exaggerated extreme of that is, will there be a societal backlash potentially in the future of people who are like, no, we're an anti-AI or an anti-cybernetic or an anti-whatever, anti-transhumanism, whatever, right?
As humans, we like taking very extreme positions.
That's right.
Anyways.
And we tribalize like crazy,
yes,
right?
And we want to just be part of some group.
Sadly, that's right. And sadly, our history is filled with one group saying all of your problems are because of that group. And
we want to blame that. So I think history in that sense, in looking at very, very large time scales, right from the time that humanity has existed, that is regardless of how ecological kind of shift AI will be, that seems to be still repetitive of our nature, regardless of how high tech or how much it solves problems for us. We will create factions. We will end up with these dystopian. Whether it's
where's the nerd faction? Sign me up for the podcast nerd faction. I'll volunteer to hold the banner for that one.
So I don't know. Like then how I do feel like there will be enough. Like I've actually seen. If I'm not wrong, I've seen enough ads on TV. They're very subtle about having your own generator, about having your own power, about those are those like survivalist kind of things. And I see
I struggle with these. I'll tell you why in a minute. No, I'll let you finish. I'll tell you why I struggle with this.
Well, and I wonder then, using that same kind of mentality, will there be that kind of separation between the use of any kind of devices and things, even though there's no way out of it, right? They're not inseparable. It's like it's part of our very being, but enough that where we separate out. Like there are enough people that do stuff like this. They do it right now as like the survivalist. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I struggle with this because I'm internally conflicted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I myself am one of these people where I'm like, yeah, I want to be self-sufficient and have like the ability to
grow your own food in your backyard.
I can't
Sufficient?
do that. Well, I mean, that would be awesome. I don't have the skills or the.
Yeah, the seed is genetically modified.
And also, can I just say one? She may not be happy with me sharing this, but I will share. My wife tried to grow a tomato plant. This is a long going like funny argument in our household. Is she tried growing a tomato plant in the Arizona desert, mind you.
Don't diss her for it. I'm giving you props, by the way.
Good, because I give her a hard time because I applaud the effort of like, let's grow our tomato plants. The amount of the sheer volume of energy that was spent just to keep this one like sad little tiny twig of a tomato plant alive. And then the part that I always give her the most grief for is that when we went away for, I think we went on vacation, she was like, asked someone to plant sit and like transport this tomato plant to their home. It was a whole thing. And I'm going, it's just a tomato plant. Like, let's don't do it. Anyway, in the end, it produced 3 tomatoes that were disgusting. And so anyway, long story short.
But there's such a joy in that.
Yeah. But, in the end, I'm like, how are those tomatoes? Like, was it really worth that? But the point was, so no, I can't grow my own food, but I like the idea of being self-sufficient. However, I do have a growing concern because you mentioned like, you must have your own generator. There's a tension between making sure that you yourself are sort of safe or have the provisions needed for an event like a power outage or whatever. The downside, though, is I fear the loss of community.
Yes.
Because
we're so individual.
And it's like, and so there's a tension there. And I oscillate back and forth on this. I mean, it's an internal struggle because on the one hand, for myself, I'm like, yeah, I should be, I want to make sure that if the power goes off, I can still play my games or like, I might still want to use my computer with the power, I'll sit there in the dark. And I do have like a battery, I don't know, it'll last like a day or something.
Basement down there.
Yeah. I'm like, we're prioritizing charges here. It's, whatever. I don't know. But the loss of, what I don't like though, is that the way that consolidates I'm going to take care of me. And as long as I'm good, you guys are on your own. Yeah. And that is a dangerous precedent because that as you start to grow that mentality across an organization, you splinter. And so suddenly it no longer becomes things that are good for all of us. It's like, I don't care about you.
Me.
It's just whatever's good for me. Yeah, you guys can.
This is super cultural though.
It is it's very tied to cultural. Yep.
Yeah. If you go, that's where you go to your socialistic places.
Oh, sure. And you can look across the globe at places that are more collective and more individual.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. That's the broadest brush you can use is look at individualized places and look at sort of, again, that sort of that more communal or cohesive group. But again, even at the micro level, when it's like, my neighborhood, my house, my whatever and then you look at the technologies around us. I mean, they support in many ways isolating and isolating and isolating. And then as humans, evolutionarily speaking, we are group-based creatures. We gather, we need community, we function well. There's a lot of studies that are, raising issues of like massive amounts of like loneliness issues across generations because we have this ability.
Isolating ourselves.
We have this ability to isolate, and technology has that as an affordance.
Those are choices that big tech has made into how they operate and behave.
And these are, and again, it's not to say that that's a bad thing because
they're helpful too.
Trust me, there's plenty of times where I'm like, just leave me alone and I am a very happy man. But it has its limits. And there's the danger, of course, when it becomes only that. But that's the thing.
I feel like we're gravitating towards it.
And so that's the thing. That's the thing that I struggle with. And again, that's an internal conflict that I have all the time is even with that same thing of like, yeah, I should do this thing and it would be great to be self-sufficient. And I'm like, as long as but then you're like, but what about everybody else?
So I'm going to tie this thread back into education and some kind of conflict. We raise this conflict at ASU Prep on purpose when we bring up what does learning in like the future of learning look like? We do this kind of, it's an exercise we do when we go out and about in conferences. And one of them talks about personalization.
Mm.
And more often than not, people perceive personalization as being isolating. That's not how it's intended.
Yeah.
But if you
That's
look
interesting.
at it, a lot of our devices do support that kind of sense of isolating one from each other, right?
Yep.
That's not the intent, personalization. So, but what's interesting to see is every time we throw that out and we ask people to pick a side, yes or no, there's like a mix. And a lot of people, if depending which system of learning they've come from or how traditional their schools may be, or not, it actually doesn't have nothing to do with traditional. It just has to do with whatever the culture
Sure.
of the school is, will initially think that it means to be separated. And that might not be the intent, but if you look at how, so when we're talking about personalization is more about meeting the student where they're at
Yeah.
and they're learning, not separating them out. But when it comes to the actual technologies and tools that we're using, they actually seem to be, sometimes can be isolating
Interesting.
from
Yeah.
one another rather than, so I'm trying to help the student through this chat, whatever, through this bot, through this whatever. But now it's like, well, I would rather go to this entity because they can
Yeah.
answer me anytime than go and ask a peer, a friend, or even have that discussion and ideation,
Yeah.
that really crucial brainstorming
Sure.
that pushes you.
Sure.
I know that so we're expecting the AI to do that now. Of course, it's just an amalgamation, but you don't want to go and have that with an actual person anymore. It's starting to like, that is creating a
Yeah.
sense of isolation. Like I can just,
Well, that's wild. And because I mean, that also, right, it is again one of these things where it's like, that is the sort of the dual edge. And all technologies share. I mean, this is an old way of metaphorically talking about technology, the dual, double-edged sword. I'm like, how many swords actually only have one edge? Isn't that like
where do we
I guess
come
there's
up
a
with
couple.
this?
There's a couple swords that probably have like a flat blade on the or whatever. I'm like, why do most swords have two sides? Anyway, but that's one of those things because like on the one hand, right, if you are a person, an individual who would struggle either again with anxiety or any personal issue or maybe a cultural one where you don't feel that you can ask a question, that this would be empowering, that you can go to this tool. But yet the other side of that is you might decide that interaction supersedes a human-to-human interaction to the extent at which you lose not only the interaction, but over time lose the skill or even the awareness of how to have that interaction with another human.
And it just do the others around you start to lose the tolerance for you also.
Or are they all doing their own thing and we're all just these weird little pod people?
People,
we're going, or hover chair people, whatever it is.
The other one I think is like Surrogate. Is it Surrogate? Have you ever seen that one? That was like, I think.
That's another show?
It was a movie.
Oh,
Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is Surrogates, where they're all just like living in at this point, this was that version where you lived in a total virtual world. And you're just plugged in all the time. Very, very, very Ready Player One types.
Okay, how have I not seen these? This is great, man.
These are so old.
Oh, it's all right.
I think I'm pretty sure it's Surrogates.
Nice.
Bruce Willis. Look up the Bruce Willis movie where he's pretty much they live through their surrogates. So they are embodied with a version like a robot of themselves. I think in reality too, or.
I have seen this. Yes.
And I think
that's a callback.
So whereas I don't even know where I was going. Well, I was just thinking about like, when you go back to, it's like they are actually isolated from one another, but they're living through a version of themselves they want to project. And so I can't help but wonder about all these like these dystopian type movies.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like the science fiction dating science fact or whatever.
Yeah.
That idea. And I kind of wonder that Ready Player One, the surrogates, do we sort of move towards that? Because we can only engage with this chatbot, which is responding to me, or only engage. This is a very baby version of it, right? With a bunch of text when it becomes fully embodied.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? Yeah. So I in that, in wondering about that, I do wonder about that. I'm not sure. At ASU Prep, these are questions that we're thinking about, wondering about. Other schools are too. I'm not saying this is.
Of course.
At least some people are.
Sure. Well, it's so there's a spectrum, right?
Some crazy people like you and me that are sitting around just for some reason going, "Oh my God, are we going to be like pod people?" But I mean, just
I won't be. Well, I will be long dead. I hope before.
We're pod people.
Before I'm a pod person.
But I will say, like, at least for loneliness, isolation, from interacting with things, there's that balance. And some of it just, we are trying to walk that fine line between what a student needs, what are they learning, what are they interacting with what is a tool that they're going to use, and their ability to think. It comes back to like really fundamental, think critically, be able to assess.
I was gonna ask you this question too, and I don't know. I mean, I don't feel any pressure to give away any strategic plans from work stuff, but in general too. I mean, this idea of moving away from digital technologies entirely. Right. So again, as some ways of thinking about that, the pendulum going the other direction, for a good solid, I would say at least minimum of 3 decades, maybe more, especially in education, has been the push of ed tech or educational technology, as in students will learn, they'll be better prepared for the world if they learn with, through, and about technology. Right. So there's been this heavy push. Going all the way back to when you first had that first Apple IIe in the corner of the classroom that you were never allowed to touch until 10 minutes before the bell rang or something. All the way through, and then there was like the one-to-one movement. Obviously, internet in the school systems made a massive increase. But long story short, there's been 30 years at minimum, and it goes back way longer than that, when people are putting televisions in classrooms and all this kind of radios and all this kind of stuff. But this heavy push around that, moving towards digital technologies will have a positive impact over the long run of critical thinking, all the skills that we need to, again, going all the way back to our conversation at the top of the show, around being that civic unit, being prepared for the economy to which will be a net positive in, hopefully. But this counter sort of position of looking at, well, what if we, again, maybe as the answer of, right, if these tools can do all that for us in the digital world, maybe we should just let them have the digital world, and we should go back to pen and paper. Right? That's
a very deep thought there.
Well, it's not alone. I mean, one of the reasons I asked you, I don't know if you've seen this, but somewhat recently, Sweden has backed off of a lot of their digital practices in schools and have gone back to reading traditional books, focusing on handwriting, going back to what we might label as an old school or a traditional analog way of learning, of doing things on paper, by hand, removing the digital tools, not because there was a direct cause and effect, but they essentially had seen a correlation of, with the increase in digital technologies in the school systems, they were having lower and lower, essentially critical thinking skills, reading comprehension, a lot of those benchmark sort of competencies coming out of schools. And they're like, let's go back to physical books.
That goes back to your question of, does it matter when all these things are just going to do it for you? I don't want to put it that.
Sure.
That's kind of a shallow way of putting it.
You can ask that. There's no harm in asking that question, right?
And I don't know. And I wonder if it's just going to be dependent on each person, like a personal view, a societal view. What is that culture's view on this idea? Obviously, Sweden, if they went kind of about this way, maybe whether or not there is enough support from at least a subsect of people that feel that way. Again, my factions kind of idea. Does that happen that way? But in thinking about that, I look at, I don't know if you know this, for our own kids, and our kids are in similar district. I just saw the policy this morning. I didn't pay attention to this morning. I just looked at it saying that they said, so it was an interesting way to phrase a usage of the cell phone. It's like, you can bring it, but you got to turn it off. So it's like, you're essentially not bringing it. So so that's just like
maybe that's a safety thing.
It could be, but I wonder how, to what level do you keep doing that? No, you can't use this. No, we're not going to use any of this. I do think that we're trying, at least the way I look at it, is maybe more moderation with it.
Sure.
I'm not sure if we go completely no digital technologies. And I should also say, I did start my children in a schooling system with no digital technologies, despite having a computer engineering background. And maybe it's because I had that background that I felt that way about it.
You're like, I know what this does to you.
And sometimes we're just governed by some of our own expertise and our thinking. So my kids actually started all their schooling in Montessori. Yeah, and Montessori has this.
Were you a Montessori kid yourself?
I grew up in Jersey, where there was no Montessoris in Jersey. I was near the casinos. I grew up around casinos.
I bet there was at least one Montessori school in Jersey.
I don't know. I think everything has to. I was near Atlantic City, Ocean City.
no Montessori schools in Jersey.
I'm pretty sure there were no. No, I grew up in a city.
I'll hear about it. Send all your hate mail to Rachna, care of nomontessorischools.com.
Let me tell you, it was like a tiny city where we had only one high school for 3 different cities. So I grew up in a place where there was really, really traditional and there weren't a lot of different models. And I don't think, even though Montessori is actually quite old.
Yeah. It's funny because like I was a Montessori kid. Both of my children went through Montessori in the early years, and it's phenomenal.
Yes.
Because so much of it is based on that self-directed learning of like what, you go, the structures are there, but like you, the learner, decide what you want to focus on and what you want, how you want to explore. And then you're guided, of course, through all the stuff, but it is really individual focused, right? And
they've kind of gently brought in the tools that they want to bring in, for research and for exploration, but it's still very tethered to the community, to the student population, to the teachers themselves. And more often, if you actually look at many of these, I think it's Facebook and Google and many of these large company, big tech company leaders, you will actually find they have a Montessori background.
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, there is a connection of again, I'll speak just anecdotally from myself and the people that I know. And there is a connection where you tend to see a lot of people who have some similar ways of thinking about things who have stemmed from a Montessori program too. And
that kind of goes to your like
that's what got me in trouble all these years. I blame it on that. Just put me in a square box and I would have turned out so much differently.
Oh, see, yeah. And I think that's what.
Or I would have just raged against the box is more likely what would have happened.
I have one of those, raging against a box. So going back to the idea of do we just, the digital technologies versus none, I think there's a moderation because there was definitely where we felt that difficulty was the moment the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
We were not prepared in the Montessori system and we just, Who would have thought that tiny little virus would wreak the havoc it did and stop all things in the ways?
A lot of people. It was a well-known threat.
Well, okay, maybe
we've had pandemics before. We knew what was at stake.
That's true. Okay, we have known this. We just didn't care.
We didn't respond globally. We did not respond well.
And then also, as an educational system, we never prepare. I mean, no one thought to prepare. Well,
that's that kind of that issue of you have a plan until you get popped in the nose, and then. Because, and to be fair too, I mean, especially in like the United States, for example, I feel like the educational system as it is in terms of like not ever having enough funding, not ever having enough sort of support is always in a state of reaction rather than being proactive. Teachers are, and I say this as, my wife is a teacher. I can say this, I see this on a daily basis. I mean, they take on so much cognitive load, so much physical workload.
Many roles.
Is so many roles. They wear so many hats.
Yes.
And all this time, and so oftentimes then the challenge, especially when it comes to technology, is you're like, well, I've got this shiny new doodad, and wouldn't it be great if you guys just took the control of that and taught all of our kids how to be doodad literate, whatever it might be, right?
That is so true.
And we thrust this on them as if it's their responsibility to now somehow be experts in something that no one is, understand what the frameworks are to how best to learn this in a way that no one understands, give them no support, give them no money, give them no respect, and give them no time. And then still go, well, what the hell happened there?
I'm going to put my head down and cry right now.
But that's I
got to go back to school.
But this is the reality. And so we thrust this upon them as if it's their responsibility to do this, which it's just not. And so in a situation like that, I mean, it's like I come back, I and sometimes to bring some levity to it, I'll invoke comedian Jim Gaffigan, who has this line,
so funny.
Right? So I'm like, because he has this bit. I think he has 5 kids or something, and he works this into his comedy routine a lot. And he has this one line, this joke, where he would say, he had just had another child, and the joke was, people ask me what it's like to have, another, like a 5th kid or something. He's like, pretend you're drowning and someone hands you a baby. And I'm like, that's what it's like for these educators. It's like, pretend you're drowning and someone hands you like a rock, and it's like, keep swimming. And that is something I think, I will hope that over time, as we kind of progress through these things and leverage these tools where we can, that we can make a positive impact there.
That's the balance part, right?
And that's the balance.
Yeah, and I don't think so. I've always struggled with very extreme points of view, and having some level of moderation that at least allows acceptance from all sides. Like, so if we go totally let's go, non-digital route, maybe there is space for both where there are parts of it. And
absolutely.
We're talking about this most recently, looking at it as more of a spectrum or a scale, not like a on-off. It is with
take that digital world. We're going away from binary. We're going to go to an analog.
Okay, that's very we can
take that.
We could go to quantum also. If
I'm both using it and not using it at the same time.
It's very Schrodinger's cat, but that one. Oh, that just messes with my mind. I can't even. We won't even get into quantum.
How many qubits do you have today?
We won't talk about quantum yet. So assuming that's not happening, but I just think that if with going back to, and these will be like my final thought.
Sure, we should wrap. I'm looking at the clock too. I'm like, I have held you here. We were past an hour. I didn't even notice. My gosh.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to apologize on air, Lisa. I was supposed to have a meeting with you, and it was about AI. So
it's okay, Lisa. Don't worry.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry, Lisa.
So we're like, as I think about this, I will probably end with a moderation angle to it for our kids, for our education systems, for where we started with our own. We started with thinking about our own kids in these learning systems, right? And I think they, at least ours are, and those that I think are even at ASU Prep, we have this great privilege of being attached to this sort of thinkers like ourselves, thinkers within the university system that are pushing and pulling. We're not. You've got both sides, and I think
absolutely,
which is really important to try to draw some sort of balance. Is you have to have both views. It's not very extreme, like everything should be AI and every single system, and no one should be using a pencil and paper anymore. But it's not the other way either. So
I agree. I agree completely. I think that's the magic.
And it's not done by one. And we were talking about this morning. We're like, well, this is a constant evolution. We can't just throw out some policy. It's maybe a guideline at best. I don't know. It's evolving along with things that are evolving in our life a little bit faster than it has in the past as a result of like the release of generative AI or the large, wider scale release of it. So I'm going to go with moderation and balance.
And I'll just add this, and I'll try to keep this short so we don't, again, hour number 2. But this is just also proof. This is why I love having you on these kind of podcasts, Rach. And this is how we talk anyway, even when we don't have microphones. This is what happens.
Yes.
Even when we're standing in a Target, this is what ends up happening.
Oh my God, we did do this in a Target.
We did do this in a Target. It's true. So I would say that I think with all technologies, right, that the moderation is the key to understanding. And again, this comes back to the philosophy around effective use of educational technology or just any technologies, understanding what are the affordances, what are the constraints, and when to leverage them and when not to, because of what you're trying to do. Because I agree, if it's all or nothing, that sets up a very dangerous precedent where you're going to be just completely unaware of gigantic blind spots because you have intentionally sort of militated or cut out that entire, way of exploring or leveraging technologies. I'm a lifelong fan of John Dewey, right?
Yes,
the 4 natural impulses, right? Of course, you have things, you have all of these sort of, the idea around these natural impulses is that whether you're in a formalized learning environment, like an educational school system, or you are just a human being going on, this creative learning journey yourself, you have this idea of, it's all of these different sort of pathways around how you, as a student, how you learn, how you engage. And when those technologies have different affordances, that's wonderful to use them. But again, not to be all or nothing.
Yes.
And I think, that ultimately comes back to this big question that we ask all the time is like, when these new technologies are coming, how do we evaluate either their direct impact, their potential impact, get into the future stuff. You talk about second and third order magnitude impacts, but really starting to assess how are these going to change what we do? How are they changing? How might they change? And start really asking these questions. Again, if we ask this question of what does it mean to be human in the future, the flip side of that is when we're looking at technological innovations that we're living in, is start asking the questions of what are the actions we can start taking today to end up in a preferred future state. right? We've talked about some of these ones that we don't want. We don't want to end up the people in the hover chairs from WALL-E or whatever. So what are the actions that we need to start taking today to understand what is needed, what decisions, what ways of thinking, what questions do we need to be asking to ensure that we don't end up there, and then we end up in a place that we want to be and where we're all happy.
I would deeply urge anyone listening, in the education space especially, to hold that thought and that idea, those questions in mind as you're thinking about these ideas, you're thinking about learning, teaching without ed tech, whatever it might be. Just hold that those set of questions in your mind as you are creating and doing. And those are some of the questions that we do ponder. We have tactical things that we got to get through on a day-to-day basis. And then there are the forward-looking ones that we have to wonder about. So I urge us all to sort of think about that. So thank you. That was a good set of questions.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. And now the podcast begins. That was one hell of a cold open. No, I'm just joking.
Thank you, Sean.
Rachna, this is so much fun. Is there anything you want to plug? Any websites or anything you want to plug? Or any shows you're watching other than Humans? So you already plugged that one, I guess.
I guess that was an interesting one. It didn't actually survive very long. If there's anything that I would plug, I would just say that, definitely check out ASU Prep and ASU, just because we're part of that system.
Of course.
And some of that thinking. Nothing is perfect, but I do appreciate a constant moving forward and balance and rebalancing that happens in these systems.
Yeah, that's great.
And we do have Levitt Lab opening soon, which is really exciting at the Teachers College. It is very much taking on I would say a very progressive version of an AI thinking in it. Very much, I feel like it's going almost back to this Montessori way of thinking, very self-driven. I really appreciate that. And then I'm thinking about books and things that I am reading.
Yeah, what are you reading right now? You got anything to add to we did a few episodes ago, we did a summer reading list. You got anything to add?
Well,
it could be totally fun. I don't know if you heard that episode, but there was nothing serious on it. It was all fun.
Well, can I plug my kids' book?
Yes.
So my daughter Leia wrote a book. It's dystopian called Breathless.
Oh, okay.
And I am reading that for the first time.
And it's available?
She's looking to publish on Amazon, which is, again, the beauty of some of our technologies and systems has allowed young authors like herself to get out
to
there
be able
very
to self-publish.
quickly. Yeah, to self-publish, to make it low key and to
very
be able to get feedback from people quickly. So she's in the process of figuring out publishing. She started writing it when she was, I think, 11. And so then she finished it. But
that's so cool.
It's really interesting because it talks about power and the balance. And I was like, where'd you get these ideas? I think it's history and social studies. It actually wasn't the internet. It was her traditional learning of social studies and history. So she talks about this idea of a world without oxygen.
Oh,
and it's very you're kind of your WALL-E-ish, maybe all resources, and this power struggle that occurs between the OCD, Oxygen Control Department.
Oh, this is great.
I'm loving this
novel.
I
love it. We need to option this for, we need to make a little TV series, a little mini series. I'm loving this.
She might do it. Now kids can do that.
This is one of the things that's fantastic, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So yeah.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
Well, yeah. Well, and if
Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you were able to come. And we'll have to have you back next time when Andrew is here. So the three of us can have, kick off another conversation.
That would be fun.
I'll put anything we mentioned, I'll stuff the show notes with links. And as soon as Leia's book is available, let me know because we'll talk about it and we'll push it out.
I will definitely share that. Thank
you. So thank you so much for joining us on Modem Futura. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll see everybody on the next episode of Modem Futura.
Demodulating signal.
Modem Futura is a production of the Future of Being Human initiative at Arizona State University. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. To learn more about the Future of Being Human initiative and all of our other projects, please visit us on the web at futureofbeinghuman.asu.edu.
End transmission.